On a Sunday in October 2014, 3 men, 3 mules, and a horse set out to ride the Old Spanish Trail, a 1,200-mile trading route from Los Angeles to Santa Fe. No one had attempted to ride the full extent of this trail on horseback since 1849. This is their story.
Great chulos.
In the 1800s, the Old Spanish Trail was the longest, most arduous pack mule route in American history. Travelers had to creep across the deserts of California and Nevada, ford 2 major rivers, and cross parts of the Rocky Mountains before finally reaching Santa Fe. At that time, Los Angeles and Santa Fe stood at either end of a vast Native American territory, and each town was heavily dependent on the Old Spanish Trail for supplies and news from the rest of the world.
You know, I've always wanted to do a long trek and to try to suss out or understand better these trails, what confronted the original people when they came across.
Backcountry horsemen amassed, assemble in a cast, to ride a trail to the past, a trail not ridden since the times of old, or so they were told. To succeed they must be bold on the Old Spanish Trail, Los Angeles to Santa Fe. It's 1,200 miles. They leave at the break of day.
Here we are at Olvera Street, downtown Los Angeles, the birthplace of LA. And this was the western end of the trade route, the Old Spanish Trail. This is where the traders came in with their mule trains. Obviously, it'd be pretty hard to bring horses down here the way the traders did, and so we had to just start way out at San Bernardino to the east. So we decided to start at the next major post on the trail, the Cajon Pass. This is where I met with my traveling companions, my 2 old friends, Richard and Jim.
I used to say, I leave at 8. If you want to ride with me, be there.
Richard Waller has long been interested in the immigration routes through the Great Basin. This project was due to his imagination and leadership. The year before, he traveled the whole route on motorcycle and made contacts with people to help us along the way. Jim Clark is an expert mule man who has packed through the most difficult and obscure routes in the Los Padres National Forest. I know them both through the Backcountry Horsemen, and we all happen to have enough time on our hands to take on an effort like this. Our great friend and Backcountry Horseman Kathleen Phelps joined us on her Arabian mare Izzy for the California League.
First day!
Planning adventures is an entertaining part of the process. And the more you plan, the better it's going to turn out. You know, you can't just load up the animals and head out. I worked out where every stop could be or should be in 20-mile increments over the whole 1,200 miles from Los Angeles to Santa Fe.
It was a very exciting moment when we finally got on our mules and headed up the Cajon Pass. The animals, when you begin a trip, are always very excited. And I was on my new mule, Floyd, Pretty Boy Floyd, who's pretty high energy anyhow. And then we were faced with all kinds of things that we were going to encounter, which I think were going to be new to him. It's the heaviest industrial transportation corridor that I've ever been in my life. We had to cross the rail lines. We had to find a way to get across. And the trains seemed to be coming on each line about every 15 minutes or a half hour, and the trains were a mile long. And so we were very apprehensive about getting stuck between the rail lines. It was sort of hair-raising, and then not knowing how the animals were going to react. But actually, we got through it pretty well. Finally, we got up to the Pacific Crest Trail, and actually headed south on it. We went by that famous feature on the PCT, the McDonald's. So we stopped by.
I want a large Diet Coke.
Went through the drive-in and ordered some food. It would be very difficult to do this route without a truck to take us across the sections you can't ride anymore. Which brings me to the fourth and most invaluable member of our traveling band, Rod Thompson.
Fine canned stuff.
Who drives ahead every morning to pick us up at some obscure point on the map.
After I got out of the service, I joined the Sheriff's Department, did my 33 years. Because the Wrangler that Jim had set up couldn't come, it became me. Jim, being my cousin, he had a little more than just arm twisting capacity. He had a little blood work that was being done, and he says, hey, we're family, you got to do this for me. Here I am doing it, and I'm kind of enjoyed it. You know, the camaraderie, the jumping that I'm doing, even though I'm not on the ride, I'm still kind of having a good time, enjoying vicariously living through their experiences on the trail.
I trusted Jim's selection of a traveling companion.
And I've broken every bone in my body. There's certain people I would never invite to come to a group, like I do with backpacking in the high Sierras.
Yeah.
And there are others that I say, you know what, they seem to like, they'll fit along fine, you know.
I think of it, I go back to my mountaineering days. Can you spend a week in a tent with the person without feeling like you must kill them? Today we had issues of direction, route, stream crossings, and we discussed. And nobody said, I'm going this way, I don't care what you guys think. We could easily get into conditions of high stress, and having established the ability to communicate and to reach consensus and to discuss is really critical. We're fortunate in that our riders are just very experienced people. I'm probably the least experienced, but I do a really good job of following along.
When Richard Waller suggested doing the old Spanish Trail, I just jumped at the opportunity. I live in Santa Barbara on the coast of California, and I knew that there had been some horse trade between Santa Fe and the coast of California, and I'd always heard that people from Spain would come into California, into our cities, or pueblos, steal horses, and then just take off east. And they'd head for the Mojave River. And I was wondering, Mojave River, what's there? Some of the crossings were, they called them jornadas, were very difficult, up to 60 miles without water. And I just wondered, how the heck did they do it? I thought this is the opportunity to find out.
We're planning to ride 18 miles just downstream from Victorville, heading towards Barstow.
Day number 3, here we go. We've got a couple of extra people today.
We don't really know very well what the climate might have been like in the 1830s. I imagine that there must have been quite a lot more water.
They pushed on through the Mojave Desert, covering 40 miles in 3 long, hot, windless days before arriving at the lush oasis of the China Garden Date Ranch. The China Ranch is a small family-owned farm right in the path of the old Spanish Trail. When John C. Fremont, American explorer, politician, and soldier, traveled through here in the spring of 1843, this area was Paiute territory. In fact, 2 of his scouts, Kit Carson and Alexis Gaudet, shot and killed 2 Indians right here in China Ranch Canyon. The riders continued past Tecopa and on to Resting Springs Ranch, where they were hosted for 2 nights by the owner, Joe Goshall, and the manager, Alan Hart. Resting Springs, now a private ranch, was the best campsite and most dependable water source on the route between Las Vegas and the Mojave River.
So I'm getting ready for Vegas. We're going to be there in 4 days.
Before the white man, the Paiute Indians did well in the areas surrounding Las Vegas by trading and sharing the harsh lands. Chief Tecopa was the leader of the southern Paiute at the time of Fremont. Tecopa is a Paiute word meaning wildcat, and he certainly lived up to the name. In 1844, he led the Paiute in a 3-day-long battle with the expedition of Fremont and Carson here at Resting Springs.
We got bluegill and bass over in the ponds, coyotes, bobcats, tarantulas, sidewinders. I'd catch them and put them under the homestead.
Yeah, little did they know.
Yeah, now the environmentalists will shut you down. BLM, Forest Service, environmentalists, they're all hypocrites. Environmentalists, they're driving fossil-fueled rigs. They should all walk. They should be following these guys behind on their horses, on foot.
He's a barefoot horse and he doesn't have shoes on. And so, for one, he's getting ridden so much here that his feet can get worn down, and 2 is it can be really rocky. So these just protect their feet. These are easy boots.
I'm gonna guide you out of the brush.
Oh yeah, we've already done brush.
I can show you some brush that you wouldn't want to be in.
So Alan, thank you very much for your hospitality. Firewood, the dates, the place, awesome.
I like making you guys, you horsemen, as comfortable as possible because I know what it's like and been there and done that.
When I was a scoutmaster, I used to teach my boys what I think is the wisdom of our Western poet, Gary Snyder, who says that when we look at the landscape, we should try to clear away our current civilization, look underneath all of the recent developments, try to look under the highways, the cities, the infrastructure, and find the ancient pathways. Try to peel back and discover what the land really had to offer here originally. I think there's wisdom in that, great wisdom, because if we plow ahead, paving and covering up and ignoring the natural landscape, we may be headed in a direction that's not the wisest.
That's the old Spanish Trail. That's where General Fremont, Kit Carson, they traveled that trail.
Kit Carson was a trapper, scout, Indian agent, soldier, and authentic legend of the West. In 1842, he met John Fremont in Missouri, who soon hired him as a guide for his many expeditions. Emigrant Pass was established as the major pack trail and wagon road on the 24-mile route between Resting Springs and Stump Spring. It was an incredible obstacle for wagon travel due to the rocky roadbed and the steep ascent. Currently, the group most often studying the history of this route is the Old Spanish Trail Association, who meet up every year to discuss the history and future of the trail.
We're a nationwide nonprofit organization that supports the knowledge, interpretation and education and protection of the congressionally designated National Historic Trail. We are involved in preservation efforts in the sense of where there may be a project that is proposed that could be damaging to or derogate the values of the trail in one area or another. We will comment on that and try to preserve those areas as well as possible so that people continue to have the opportunity to see the landscapes in the condition that they existed at the time that the trail was historically traveled.
In the journals of Carson, they said that the whole route was just strewn with carcasses of animals, broken down wagons, and abandoned belongings. Water-wise and grazing-wise, the route was easier back then than it is today, which still doesn't discount those 50 and 60 mile drive jornadas. Those certainly existed. Because of the support that we had from Rod, primarily, and our trucks with the feed and water, our expedition was relatively leisurely, not so difficult. But I was constantly in mind of the work for the original traders. It was a business, of course, and they had hired people to do the work. They'd come out west with maybe 100 mules packed with woven goods, and then they'd return in the early spring with up to 2,500 head of stock. The work, the effort to manage all of those animals, keep them all going, try to keep them alive, encounters with the Indians on top of it, a laggard, or a person who was out looking for stock that had cut out and gone another way, stood the chance of being killed. It was very, very difficult. I was just very, very impressed by Kit Carson's last trip along the trail, and it was 1848. He was carrying official documents from Los Angeles to Washington, and they made the trip from LA to Santa Fe in 43 days. That was over 30 miles a day. Those fellows must have been in the saddle for at least 10 or 12 hours a day. And on top of everything else, they had trouble crossing the rivers. They had to build rafts. They built 3 rafts to carry their gear, and then they swam the horses across. They lost one of the rafts, which they lost some saddles, guns, and clothes, and some of the crew had to walk the rest of the way or ride bareback, and they still, with all of those impediments, they still made it in 43 days. There was a toughness there that's hard to imagine today.
It was real easy, you know. It's like that's the grass. Come on, boy. Come on.
We are currently at the Mesquite Rodeo Grounds, which is just inside Arizona from Nevada, and we'll be riding up the old Spanish Trail route beyond Beaver Dam Wash. And what we'll do today is go under the freeway and cut across the desert until we approach the old trail route, which is also Highway 91. And then we'll get picked up and come back to camp.
Every day when they take off, I usually try to find a pickup spot for them. Then I'm sitting there looking for that little spire of dust coming up through the sagebrush and hoping to see them.
A lot of times we didn't know whether we could get through the rendezvous point that we'd imagined with Rod, because there might be fences. And other times there were gullies and streams. And so we wandered and wandered and wandered trying to find our way. And that's a genuine adventure. It's stimulating and very gratifying when you overcome it, and it gives you a deeper understanding of what our forefathers went through.
With precision like a laser, swinging axes sharp as razors, felling trees with a single chop. Dig and tread, you bet your asky, they were using a Pulaski, and they're almost at the top. Almost at the top.
No, we've had a nice time. We've gone through some gorgeous country.
I bet.
Pretty well desert, though.
Yeah, pretty much desert.
Yeah.
Now, how do you know which is the right trail? When you're going out through that desert, there's so many damn roads and stuff everywhere.
Well, we have maps, and when they're going west, it was a pack train.
Uh-huh.
When they were going east, it was 2,000 to 4,000 horses.
Yeah.
So it from that mountain to that mountain.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. So they're all over. So we're bound to be on the eastbound right now. I mean, it's just, we can't get off it.
Now, while you guys are here, our house is your house. If it's too cold to sleep out, we've only got 3 spare bedrooms. The Spanish Trail's over here, just about 2.5 miles west of us.
Okay.
But we'll go clear down to the hairpin turn and start from there.
Nice.
And it's probably a 14-mile ride on Monday. It's a road on the old Spanish Trail.
Yeah.
Good,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And it's just a little 10-foot wide dirt road.
Yeah.
Why would the old Spanish Trail have gone all the way up to central Utah and then down into Los Angeles?
Sure.
And what I was explaining to them was all of this area out in here was Ute and Paiute territory. They are Uto-Aztecian speakers. All of this area down in here was controlled by the Mojave, who are Hokan. Those two language groups, as a big family 7,000 years ago, fought a genocidal war, so they were blood enemies. So when the fathers hired Indian guides, they hired Paiutes. And the Paiutes had to go around the bad Indians. Armijo hired a Mojave Indian, a Hokan speaker, right? And so he was allowed to take a shorter route, straighter across, because he could go through his own territory. That's what that was all about.
I see.
Hell, I don't know how to tell a story on film. Okay, you guys are on film now. What's the name of this, Richard? What's the name of this campsite?
This is the Jefferson Hunt Monument Campsite.
This is the Jefferson Hunt Monument Campsite. I think I see a buckaroo over there in the distance getting his bed ready. And just to the left of the prominent snow, there's a gap, and that'll be our route next year.
Well, we're in camp at the Parowan Fairgrounds. Our first day back on the trek. It was been 8 months since we were here last. We ended the ride in November 2014 here. We'll start this morning and we'll head out through the little town of Paragona, then up Little Creek into Bear Valley, which is at the southern end of the Markagunt Plateau of the Wasatch Range. I did not bring my Mustang Jeffers, as you can't get shoes on him without drugging him unconscious. And for the kind of miles that we're doing, shoes have turned out to be important. So I have a new horse, Tokima, and he takes shoes nicely. Jim has 2 mules with him, Sadie and Chico.
She was so funny getting shod, though.
Yeah.
It's just like getting a manicure and a pedicure. He'd pick her foot up, she'd hold it up, and he'd turn around, and she'd still be holding it up. She was so cute.
Otis is on Floyd. Floyd did the trip last year, and he'll do the trip this year, and he'll be the first mule to re-ride the old Spanish trail since 1848, which is pretty cool for Floyd.
Well, mules are really, really smart. Mules are hybrids, and a mule's a hybrid with a horse and a donkey. And so they have this half-wild quality to them. And you can't breed them. You can't breed color in them. You can't breed other traits. And you can't breed the brains out of them. Well, mules take a lot of patience. What comes down is their famous stubbornness, is their intelligence and their sense of survival. You've got to be real careful about pushing them. If you try to push them too hard, you may be making a mistake. I like them for their personalities. I like them for their intelligence, their sense of survival. There are some forgiving qualities about them too. You can get away with things working with mules that sometimes you can't get away with working with horses.
We're gonna ride out here to the little town of Paragona, pass through Paragona, and then we take Little Creek Road, and that's the old Spanish trail. It goes up onto high mountain valleys.
3 old goats with iron wills, looking for some thrills, and a path through the hills. The signs still show on the trees and rocks the marks of passing stock, a history to unlock on the old Spanish trail. Los Angeles to Santa Fe, it's 1,200 miles, and they leave at the break of day.
I've written about slave trade on the old Spanish Trail. The Ute Indians used to capture the Paiute Indians, and trappers captured the Paiute Indians, and they sold them in Los Angeles. If they captured them on the way back, they sold them in New Mexico. So slave trade was a big deal in New Mexico with the Spanish and the New Mexicans afterwards. And it continued even after America took over. That's a good question. Is the young generation interested in it? Not as much as my kids were. It seems like there's more things to distract them, and there's less interest in history. We have to start earlier and tell them some stories about the trails and the pioneers when they're younger, and then they grow up and realize in the Mojave Desert, they look around and they see Indian sites, they see Indian trails, they see old Mormon wagon road trails, they see the 49er trails, and they see campsites where Indians lived, and people had mining towns. Now there's mining towns are all gone. and deserted and sometimes vandalized, and we don't like that. And it's like in other countries, you want to save the history of your past. You want to save it for future generations.
Today, a group of members of the Central Utah Backcountry Horsemen and 3 representatives from the Fish Lake National Forest join us. They will guide us for the next 3 days along the summer shortcut, the Fish Lake Cutoff. We will be starting here in Grass Valley, right up past Oak Springs, and around Fish Lake to Tasha Horse Camp.
My name's Jake Freeborn. I'm with the Fremont River Ranger District. We're going to try and follow the old Spanish Trail as near as we know. Everybody understands today's about kind of retracing the old Spanish Trail a little bit. One of the really neat things we've got going for us is Robert Leonard, the forest archaeologist. This has kind of been his life's work. He's pretty confident in this end of the Fish Lake Cutoff, but as everybody knows, you know, these trails could be anywhere from 50 feet to 5 miles wide. And so there's parts of hit and miss and whatnot. As we're riding up through the beginning of this today, he's taken the time to kind of flag the trail in fluorescent. Fluorescent orange means you're kind of generally there. If you see fluorescent green, then that's a cut that he's actually marking and calling where the mules came through. And so you'll kind of see the disturbed stone and disturbed rock, and that's kind of what we're looking for. All in all, we got about 20 miles to do today, so we'll just try and pick a nice gentle pace.
Probably the nicest climate we're going to have on this whole trip.
I'm the president of our chapter of Backcountry Horsemen here in Central Valley, Utah. We have about 55 members and probably about 25, 30 active members. We have a few that are just, you know, kind of like checkbook members. They support what we do. Most of the people that were here today were backcountry horsemen. So we spend a lot of time over here with the Fremont Ranger District, working on the trails, clearing the trails, keeping the trails cleared and open, and then working on Tasha campground here. We call it the crown jewel of equestrian camping in Utah. If you don't have a horse, you cannot camp here.
And Ray Connor, thanks so much. We're very appreciative, and we want you to know that a big part of our ride is to spread the word and promote the Backcountry Horsemen of America and all of its state components to preserve and protect equestrian access on public land.
For us, traveling across these routes, it's a connection with our past. And I'd like to say too, point out that this saddle that I'm riding here, this was made by my friend Gary McClintock, who just passed away last Thursday. Yeah, Gary made the saddle for me about 15 years ago, and it was on mule bars because I ride mules. It's just been the greatest pleasure to spend so much time using something that a good friend of mine has made.
How do you manage horses in the Mojave Desert? I mean, you have to have water.
We always have barrels of water in our trailers, and of course sometimes not there, but like here, you know, there are streams you can drink out of, and the horses vastly prefer that. In fact, my mule, I've only had him for say a month. He probably drank out of a stream for the first time in his life. He's only 6.
Yeah.
On this ride, and he couldn't believe it. Wow, this is water, and it's just running down the road. Ooh.
Oh, it's nice and cold.
Oh yeah.
Then we will continue north through wild country for 2 more days with an overnight to the crossing of Highway I-70.
Is we're going to ride down to where the Fish Lake starts, and then there's some really neat things I want to show you. I want to show you the wagon road, all of the swales, how wide the Fish Lake cutoff is, the arrow tree.
You're pretty convinced that this erosion was caused by stock coming through here.
Oh yeah, I can tell you that the Fish Lake's cutoff is smaller than the old Spanish Trail, which is massive disturbance. But there's quite, 400 feet wide on this slope. You've got stock coming down. And this is not cows. Cows don't do straight up and down. I've worked here on the Fish Lake National Forest since 1980. I came as a seasonal park ranger for Mesa Verde, and this project has been phenomenal for 29 of my 35 years. We've been out here 6 years, almost an obsession, and the information that we're gathering is phenomenal. I just wish the National Park Service would listen to us. They're good at ignoring people, but we'll see what happens. This is probably 1795, and the idea of tree ring dating is that a tree will add 1 year per, or 1 ring per year. So if you've got a tree growing 300 years, you'll have 300 rings on it. If you cut a blaze into it, they can tell you exactly what year that blaze was cut because the tree continues to grow around the blaze.
Bob, can you show me the arrow?
Oh, sure.
To know that we're traveling in the footsteps of the traders, the caravans of 1830 to 1848. And when we go up a trail and we see traces of it, we see where mules walked from that long ago. For a historian like myself, it's very exciting because you are actually walking in history. It's like walking through Rome or Paris, except this is us. This is our West.
Maybe we're not a big town, but you know what we do? We help people get through the Mojave. That's what we do. And Old Spanish Trail is one of those things that I have a passion for.
How are you going to get these people in this town to realize that the Old Spanish Trail came through here? I said, we have to have a day. And I wanted to teach people, teach our younger youth, this is why you're here. This is your ancestors did this. They created this trading trail. I think that, as time goes on, our younger generation is going to get involved. They're going to start wondering, why do I act like this? Why do I believe in these things? Why do I feel so connected to certain things in life?
He had 3 graves.
I have to consider this in the spirit of the old Spanish trail. And knowing that their route varied, sometimes by many miles, it isn't a single track. It's a route, and it's spread out. If you're moving 2,000 horses over a route, it's not a single track. So we're staying pretty close over most of the route to the actual, and where we vary, it's usually due to private land or busy highways.
They continued for 5 more days until they arrived in Moab, where Elizabeth Eliason had organized a town welcoming party and several trail rides together with members of the Canyonlands Backcountry Horsemen.
We're going to have a town welcoming. We're hoping we get at least 50 people. We're going to parade through Moab and end up at the Windwalker Horse Ranch for a potluck dinner with the Backcountry Canyonlands horsemen. Whee! And I've been so excited for this. It's like living vicariously through Richard Waller. What a guy. Came all the way up here to Fish Lake just to see if they were really doing this, and they are.
Y'all here?
One of the things that delighted me the most about our travels was all the people we met. People with stories, often with deep roots in the land. People who brought the history to life. Today we met Agustin Garcia, who kindly showed us his family lands.
My great-great-grandmother was an Indian that they stole when she was a little kid, a baby, when they were fighting Spaniards with the Indians.
Oh my.
In Gallup. My
Yeah.
great-great-grandmama came from Gallup.
So that's where they took her after they stole her?
No, there's where they stole her.
Oh, that's where they stole her.
And then she was raised here in Catinon.
Huh?
So the Spaniards and the Indians fought here.
Yeah.
And these were the Apaches? Or
the Navajos.
The Navajo.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's where the road goes up, right there on the side of the hill. And once you get on top, you can see the old roads.
Oh yeah.
Okay, this is 2 for each one.
You didn't get as much. I'll take this.
So hungry, right, Katie? Quit whining.
When it rains, water blows in here and I have to put a tarp up. I put a tarp up here against the side. I'm always on the lookout for an adventure, a route or a pathway or a landscape. The route isn't just paved for them. You've got to use your imagination and strike out, not knowing necessarily where you're going to end. And we did that a lot on the Old Spanish Trail.
Well, actually, I just kicked that out a minute ago.
So this is where you're hanging out, but you're doing your distance and then coming back? Is that what you're doing?
What happens is, you know, we say we ride out of a location.
Yeah.
We go out and we do our mileage for the day.
Oh, I see.
And then Rod picks us up in the 6-horse stock trailer, brings us back to camp.
Are you doing most of the mileage?
The trail was 1,200 miles, and we will have ridden about 800 of it.
Really?
We will be in Santa Fe the morning of the 16th. Drive there. That afternoon we have a parade down Washington Street into the plaza with the sheriff's posse.
Right.
And that's the accumulation of the trip.
Which course did you
We're
take?
using
The southern route?
the main route, which was pioneered by William Wolfskill in 1830 when he left Santa Fe for California.
And it went up north.
Yeah, the Armejo route worked, but not enough grass, not enough water.
That's pretty south.
And the crossing of the Colorado, and you know, they were using the steps carved by Dominguez and Escalante. And what we're doing tomorrow, because we can't ride Abiquiu to Santa Fe because it's just not safe. Debbie Spickerman, who is president of New Mexico Backcountry Horsemen, said, look, this is an old trading route.
Nice to meet you. Jacqueline.
Jacqueline.
Nice to meet you, sir.
I'm not a sir, that was my daddy.
Oh, yeah, heard that before.
Today, with Debbie Spickerman and Backcountry Horsemen of New Mexico guiding us, we'll be riding down across the face of Abiquiu Dam and then along the Chama River.
We're going to follow, hopefully it's somewhat historical part of the trail. I'm kind of optimistic about it. I'm thinking maybe some of the guys might have come this way. And we'll end up going down the river road and through the little village of Las Barrancas, coming out in the village of Abiquiu, and then crossing the highway and going on to the Abiquiu Fairgrounds.
The Old Spanish Trail followed trails long used by Native American traders and hunters. In 1829, the New Mexico trader Antonio Armijo and 60 men used this trail to travel from Abiquiu to San Gabriel Mission in California. Armijo became the first Hispanic trader to take mules laden with woolen goods from Nuevo Mexico to Alta California. Armijo returned to Santa Fe in 1830 on the same route with over 400 highly prized California mules and horses, demonstrating that a trade route to California could be a profitable venture.
Yay! Thank you. Thank you. Cheers.
Last ride, it's all coming to a close.
Long
off on our last cloud of hen shit and roses.
Hello, Richard. It's. I will head on up. Hopefully, the road isn't too bad where I can't get to you.
I thought our logo, this one
There
in
it is.
front.
You need supervision.
The plaza in Santa Fe, according to Spanish records, was established around 1607, and it's the heart and soul of the city of Santa Fe. The end of the trail was on the plaza. The young children would see the wagon trains or the mule trains coming in, and they would scream and yell and shout and run and tell their parents, the wagons are here or the mule trains are here. And everybody would come to the plaza to meet the people and to see what goods were available and to buy horses and mules.
Their steeds push through the desert heat and through the mountain sleet and even through the urban beat. But the land has changed since the Spanish days, concrete overlays, and the tread is washed away on the old Spanish trail. Los Angeles to Santa Fe, it's 1,200 miles. They leave at the break of day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Santa Fe. My name is Pat Kuhlhoff. I'm the president of the Salida del Sol chapter of the Old Spanish Trail, and we are here today to welcome these riders who are finishing a 1,200-mile ride. Our master of ceremonies today is Thomas Romero.
When Pat told me about this ride and what you all were doing, we wanted to get involved. We thought this was terrific, and we are so pleased to have you arrive safely and with your lovely mules.
You've taken the trouble to actually ride between here and California. And it's times like this when I really wish I owned my own horse. And I'd be riding with you, and I would be retracing the footsteps of my ancestors who went to California and who left their mark in California, as many did. And so I really want to thank you for going the extra mile in doing what you did.